All right, let's just get right into it. Today, we're unpacking what is easily one of the most baffling and honestly most unsettling aviation mysteries in modern history: the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370. You know, in the 21st century, a massive commercial jetliner that's tracked by a literal web of global tech just isn't supposed to vanish into thin air. But it did. So we're going to look at the hard data, the timelines, and the established facts to figure out exactly how a modern airplane just drops completely off the map. But before we get lost in the radar data, we really need to ground ourselves in the human reality of this. 239 people. That's how many folks boarded that plane on March 8, 2014, expecting nothing more than a totally normal, safe flight. These weren't just names on a passenger manifest, right? We're talking about families, students, workers coming home. They're settling into their seats, probably watching a movie under the cabin lights, fully expecting to land in Beijing just a few hours later.
And the sheer shock of this whole thing is really amplified by this crazy contrast. On one hand, you have a departure that was basically perfect. The plane was a Boeing 777-200ER, which has an absolutely impeccable safety record. Plus, the weather was totally calm and clear. But then, bam! The other side of the coin is terrifyingly sudden. No warning, no emergency mayday call, nothing. The radar signals just vanished. So let's break down exactly how that timeline played out.
Section 1. The plane that vanished.
Okay, to understand the core anomaly of this mystery, we need to look at the initial flight. MH370 takes off from Kuala Lumpur, climbs smoothly to a cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. Less than an hour in, everything is completely by the book. At exactly 1:19 a.m., the co-pilot makes what sounds like a totally standard sign-off to Malaysian air traffic control. He says, "Goodnight, Malaysian 370. But just minutes later, something entirely inexplicable happens. The plane's transponder, that's the device that constantly blasts the plane's identity and location to the ground, gets manually switched off. And right at the same time, the ACARS system, which sends digital text messages back and forth to ground stations, just stops. Just like that. Dropping entirely from civilian radar, the plane goes completely dark.
Section 2. A sudden change in course.
Now, when civilian comms go dark like that, investigators have to scramble and look at other tracking data. And this is where things get really wild. We've got takeoff at minute 0, a super routine flight for the first 40 minutes, and then boom, communications end right before the 60-minute mark. But here's the catch. Even though civilian radar lost the plane, military primary radar was still watching. Military radar basically just bounces radio waves off big metal objects in the sky, right? It doesn't care if your transponder is on or off. And what that military radar captured is shocking. Immediately after communications were cut, the plane made a radical, deliberate U-turn. It turned sharply back over the Malay Peninsula, flying right back the way it came, and then headed out over the Andaman Sea.
I mean, think about it. An airplane does not just manually cut its own comms and pull a U-turn by accident. This was a drastic, calculated maneuver, and it forces us to ask the million-dollar questions. Who changed the route? And for what reason? These are the questions that literally stopped aviation experts in their tracks and kicked off a frantic global investigation.
Section 3. The Global Search Operation. Once everyone realized MH370 was completely off course, the response was, well, it was unprecedented. Seriously, modern aviation had never seen anything like this. At first, they focused on the South China Sea, right under where civilian radar lost track of the plane. He had ships and aircraft from a bunch of different countries rushing in, totally ignoring borders to work together. But within a few days, as that military radar data and some new satellite info trickled in, investigators realized they were looking in the completely wrong ocean.
To really wrap your head around why finding this plane was basically an impossible task, you have to look at how the search area shifted. A British satellite company called Inmarsat found out that even after the plane's main systems were killed, a satellite terminal on board was actually still sending out these automated handshakes, basically electronic pings, to a satellite way out over the Indian Ocean. There were 7 of these pings spread out over several hours. Using some incredibly complex math based on the Doppler effect, analyzing the slight frequency shifts of those pings, engineers figured out the plane had flown deep, deep into the remote southern Indian Ocean. Suddenly, the search area exploded. We are talking hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of dark, deep, turbulent water. It was literally trying to find a needle in an ocean of haystacks.
But despite that massive, historic effort and countless hours running advanced sonar along the ocean floor, the main body of the aircraft was never found. Now, years later, a few pieces of debris did eventually wash ashore. The biggest one was a wing part called a flaperon that turned up on Reunion Island off the coast of Africa. And while that physical evidence confirmed without a doubt that the plane ended up in the ocean, the court mystery didn't budge.
We still had virtually zero answers about how or why it ended up there.
Section 4. 4 prevailing theories.
So, missing the actual plane, investigators had to rely entirely on the data they had to try and model what happened. Let's impartially look at the 4 main possibilities the data points to. Number 1, mechanical failure. This theory suggests something catastrophic happened, like a fire or a rapid loss of cabin pressure that knocked the crew out, leaving the plane to just fly on autopilot. Number 2, hijacking. Since that transponder was manually switched off, a lot of people think a bad actor forcefully took control of the cockpit. Number 3, pilot involvement. The route change was just so deliberate, hitting specific navigational waypoints, that the data heavily suggests it was flown by someone with professional training. And finally, number 4, unknown events. Basically, this is the bucket for highly unpredictable scenarios that just completely defy normal aviation models.
Now, people have fiercely debated these theories for years, but it all boils down to one incredibly frustrating fact: nobody actually knows what happened. Without the black boxes, the flight data and cockpit voice recorders, all those brilliant math models of satellite pings can only tell us roughly where the flight ended. They cannot tell us why it turned around, or what the person at the controls was trying to do. We've got partial data, sure, but we definitely do not have the whole story.
Section 5. An unsolved mystery.
After digging through all those radar blips, the insane satellite math, and the biggest search in history, we really have to go right back to where we started, because some mysteries never truly disappear. Behind every single data point we've looked at today, behind those massive search grids, there are still 239 missing people. And their families? They deserve to know what happened that night. They deserve to know if it was an accident, a planned event, or something completely out of left field. Just because we don't have physical evidence doesn't mean the mystery just fades away for the people left behind.
So is the truth still out there, hidden somewhere in the pitch black of the ocean? Will we ever find that one specific piece of evidence that connects the sudden loss of comms to that crazy change in course? For now, MH370 remains one of the absolute most baffling and tragic aviation mysteries of our time. I highly encourage you to keep looking at the data, think critically about what we know for sure, and just keep asking questions. Thanks so much for diving into this explainer with me today, and keep seeking to understand the mysteries around us.